A desert sun beat mercilessly on Catherine Monroe's back as she stumbled through the scrubland of Arizona territory, her torn calico dress catching on mesquite thorns. 3 days without food, 2 without water. The bruises on her arms had faded from purple to a sickly yellow, reminders of the hands that had tried to claim her as property. Her husband's hands. No, her late husband's hands, she corrected herself with grim satisfaction. Nathaniel Monroe had been cruel in life, but whiskey and a poorly shod horse had finally done what the law wouldn't, freed her from his violence. She clutched the gold wedding band in her trembling palm, the last item of value she possessed. Up ahead, smoke rose from what appeared to be a small settlement. Perhaps someone would trade food for gold. Perhaps someone would ask no questions about the woman alone in Apache country, fleeing east from the mining camp where her husband's body still lay unburied. Catherine didn't care anymore. Dignity was a luxury she could no longer afford. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and like this video. Your support means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Thank you. The settlement was smaller than she'd hoped. Just a trading post, a stable, and a few scattered buildings that looked more like afterthoughts than planning. A handful of men loitered outside, their eyes tracking her approach with the kind of interest that made her skin crawl. She'd seen those looks before. She'd married one of those looks. "Need supplies," she said, her voice cracking like desert clay. She held up the ring. "I can pay." The trader, a fat man with tobacco-stained teeth, squinted at the band. "That'd get you some hardtack and maybe a canteen of water. You look like you need more than that, though." His gaze traveled down her body in a way that made the offer's real price abundantly clear. Before Catherine could respond, before she could decide whether survival was worth that particular cost, a shadow fell across the trading post's worn planks. "She needs a meal, a bath, and a safe place to sleep." The voice was deep, measured, and utterly certain. Catherine turned to find a man standing at the edge of the porch, his presence commanding despite his stillness. He was Apache. That much was clear from his high cheekbones and the traditional medallion at his throat. But he wore white man's clothes, denim pants, a cotton shirt, boots that had seen considerable use. His hair fell past his shoulders, black as obsidian, and his eyes held the kind of intelligence that came from seeing too much, too young. The trader's face reddened. "Now, Dakota, this ain't your concern." "Put the ring away," Dakota said, his eyes fixed on Catherine with an intensity that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. "Gold isn't what we need here. You are." Catherine's fingers closed around the band, confusion warring with desperate hope. "I don't understand. My ranch, 5 miles north. I need someone who can cook, manage a household." He paused, something flickering in those dark eyes. A calculation, maybe, or a gamble. "You need a place where no one asks questions and men like him." He nodded toward the trader. "Don't come calling. Seems we both need something." I can't." Catherine swayed, the world tilting sideways. She'd been running on nothing but fear for 3 days, and her body was finally calling in its debts. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Through the haze of exhaustion, she felt herself being lifted, heard the trader's protests fade into the distance. Then there was the rhythmic motion of a horse, the solid warmth of a chest against her back, and a voice speaking low in a language she didn't understand, but that sounded like a promise nonetheless. Catherine woke to the smell of sage and wood smoke. She lay on a real bed, the first she'd experienced since leaving the mining camp, in a room that was spare but clean. Adobe walls kept out the worst of the heat, and through a small window, she could see the sun setting over a landscape that looked like God had painted it in shades of copper and gold. Her dress had been replaced with a simple cotton nightgown. Panic flared until she saw her own clothes, washed and mended, draped over a wooden chair. The ring sat on a small table beside the bed, along with a pitcher of water and a bowl of stew that was still warm. The door opened as she was draining her second cup of water. Dakota entered, carrying more firewood, and stopped when he saw her awake. "The stew," he said. "Go slow. Your stomach isn't ready for much." Catherine picked up the bowl with shaking hands, forcing herself to eat in small bites even though she wanted to devour it all at once. He was right. Her stomach cramped after just a few spoonfuls, but the warmth spreading through her body was worth the discomfort. "Who changed my clothes?" she asked, proud that her voice barely trembled. "Maria. She lives 3 miles south with her husband. I sent for her." He set the wood by a small fireplace, his movements efficient. "She'll come by twice a week. Thought you'd be more comfortable with a woman nearby." Something in Catherine's chest loosened slightly. He thought of her comfort. That was unexpected. "Why are you helping me?" She set the bowl down, meeting his eyes. "You don't know me. I could be a murderer, a thief. Are you?" "No." The word came automatically, then stopped. Was she? Nathaniel's death hadn't been by her hand, but she'd felt nothing but relief when his horse had reared and thrown him against the rocks. "At least, not with my hands." Dakota pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, his posture relaxed but attentive. "I know what it looks like when someone's running from hell. I know the difference between guilt and fear." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You want to tell me what you're running from, or do you want to eat in peace?" The kindness in that question, the choice he was offering her, made Catherine's eyes sting. "My husband, he's dead now. Died 3 days ago. I didn't kill him, but I didn't save him either." She looked down at her hands, at the faint scars from where Nathaniel's signet ring had cut her cheek. The mining camp where we lived, the men there wouldn't have cared about the difference. Mining camp, Arizona territory. Dakota's jaw tightened. "Let me guess, Copper Creek?" Catherine nodded. "That place is 20 kinds of hell." He stood, moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the fading light. "You were right to run. They would have blamed you, used you, or both. Why do you live alone?" The question escaped before Catherine could stop it. "Maria mentioned you have no wife. A man with a ranch like this?" She trailed off, realizing how presumptuous she sounded. But Dakota didn't seem offended. "I did have a wife, Sarah. She died 4 years ago. Fever took her and our daughter both in the same week." His voice remained steady, but Catherine heard the fault lines beneath it. Old grief compressed into something hard and unyielding. "I swore after that I'd never let myself care that much again. Safer that way." "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered, and meant it. He turned back to face her. "The offer I made at the trading post, it stands. You work here, keep the house, cook, mend. In return, you get a roof, food, safety. No one needs to know where you came from or what you're running from. When you're ready to move on, you move on. No strings." "No strings," Catherine repeated. It sounded too good to be true. Everything that sounded too good to be true usually was. I'm not your dead husband, Dakota said quietly, reading her hesitation with unnerving accuracy. I'm not any man who's ever made you afraid. You'll have your own room, your own space. I work the ranch from sunup to sundown. You'll barely see me, except at meals. Catherine studied his face, searching for the lie, the hidden trap. But all she saw was exhaustion that matched her own, and a loneliness he wore like armor. Two broken people, offering each other the only thing they had left, practical survival. All right, she said. I'll stay. The first week passed in a haze of recovery and routine. Catherine's body remembered how to be hungry, how to sleep without jerking awake at every sound. She learned the rhythms of the ranch. Dakota rose before dawn to tend the horses and cattle, returned at noon for a quick meal, then worked until sunset. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He always knocked before entering a room. He left her the best cuts of meat. He never stood too close. Maria proved to be a godsend, teaching Catherine the specifics of desert living, which plants could be eaten, which would kill you, how to conserve water, how to spot a rattlesnake before stepping on it. The older woman asked no questions about Catherine's past, but her knowing looks suggested she understood more than she said. He's a good man, Maria told her one afternoon as they harvested vegetables from the small garden behind the house. Dakota, the white settlers around here, they call him savage, say terrible things, but he's got more honor than most of them combined. Catherine had already noticed the tension when they'd gone to town for supplies. The way other ranchers crossed the street to avoid them, the way the general store owner served them last, his lip curled in distaste. Dakota bore it all with a stoic silence that made Catherine want to scream on his behalf. Why do they hate him? She asked. Maria's face hardened. Because he's Apache and successful. Because he refused to go to the reservation like they demanded. Because he's smarter than them, and they know it. She pulled up a carrot with more force than necessary. His father was a chief, you know. Fought in the wars. Dakota was raised in both worlds. Learned English from missionaries. Then fought alongside his people when the soldiers came. When the wars ended, he used his knowledge to buy this land legally. They've been trying to run him off ever since. That night, Catherine looked at Dakota differently across the dinner table. She'd thought she understood survival, but she'd been running for days. He'd been fighting for years. Maria told me about your father, she said. Dakota paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Maria talks too much. She said he was a chief, that you fought in the wars. That was a long time ago. Was it hard? Catherine pressed. Living in both worlds? He set down his fork, his expression distant. Imagine being told you're not Apache enough for your people, not white enough for the settlers. Imagine being called a savage by men who massacre women and children. Then being told you're a traitor by your own kin for learning their language. His eyes refocused on her. Yes, it was hard. Catherine reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried. You're curious. That's different from cruel. He looked at her hand, so close to his own, then back at her face. You can ask me things. I might not always answer, but you can ask. It was a gift, that permission. Catherine treasured it. The change came slowly, like seasons shifting in the desert. Catherine learned to ride, and Dakota proved to be a patient if demanding teacher. He taught her to read the land, to track animals, to shoot a rifle with accuracy that surprised them both. "You're a natural," he said one morning after she'd hit 3 targets in a row. "I spent years wishing I had a gun," Catherine replied, lowering the rifle. "Nathaniel made sure I never learned. Said women with weapons were dangerous." He was right to be afraid then. Dakota's smile was small but genuine. "You are dangerous, just not in the way he thought." Those moments of levity became more frequent. Catherine discovered Dakota had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable. He discovered she could make him laugh with her observations about ranch life, her comparisons between desert survival and her former life in St. Louis. "You had servants?" he asked one evening, surprised. "My father was a banker. We had money, until he gambled it all away." Catherine stirred the pot of beans over the fire. "He married me to Nathaniel to settle his debts. I went from wealth to violence in one ceremony." "Your father sold you." "Yes," she faced him. "Does that shock you?" "No. White men love to pretend they're civilized, but they traffic in daughters as readily as any barbarian." He said the last word with bitter irony. "My people arranged marriages too, but a woman could refuse, could divorce, could own property." He shook his head. "The so-called savages had more respect for women than your civilized society." Catherine had never thought of it that way, but she couldn't argue. "You miss it, your people's way of life." "Every day, but it's gone now. We adapt or we die." He looked at her with sudden intensity. "Like you're adapting." "Am I?" Catherine laughed without humor. "Some days I still wake up expecting Nathaniel to be there, expecting the blow." Dakota stood, crossed the distance between them, and stopped a careful arm's length away. "He's dead, and even if he wasn't, I'd die before I'd let anyone hurt you again." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. Catherine's breath caught, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you protect me?" "Because." He stopped, jaw working. "Because you're not property. You're a person. You're—" He turned away. "Finish dinner. I'll check the horses." He left before she could respond, but Catherine stood in the kitchen for a long time afterward, her hand pressed against her chest, where something dangerous and warm had taken root. The crisis came at the end of her 2nd month on the ranch. Catherine woke to the sound of shouting and gunfire. She grabbed the rifle Dakota had insisted she keep by her bed and ran to the window. In the pre-dawn darkness, she could see torches, at least 6 men on horseback surrounding the house. "Dakota!" She ran to his room, found it empty, then heard his voice from outside. "You're on my land illegally. Leave now, or I'll defend my property." Catherine recognized the voice that answered, Silas Blackwood, the rancher whose land bordered Dakota's to the east. She'd seen him in town, had noted the way he looked at the ranch with proprietary greed. "Your land? This is Apache territory, savage. You got no right to it." "I have a deed, filed with the territorial government. Leave, now." The response was a gunshot that splintered the porch railing. Catherine didn't think. She simply moved. She threw open the front door, rifle raised, and fired into the air. "The next one goes through flesh," she announced, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "His land, his deed, his rights, and I'll defend them same as he would." 6 faces turned toward her in surprise. Then Blackwood laughed. "Well, well. The savage has got himself a whore. That won't help you when we burn this place down, breed." He didn't finish the sentence. Dakota moved faster than Catherine could track, drawing his revolver and putting a bullet through Blackwood's hat. The rancher froze, the hat tumbling off his head. "Next one goes through your skull," Dakota said quietly. "My patience is done. You have 10 seconds to leave my property, or I start shooting in earnest. And the lady beside me? She doesn't miss." For a long moment, the standoff held. Then Blackwood spurred his horse backward. "This ain't over." "Yes," Dakota replied. "It is. You come back, you die. Tell your friends." They watched until the torches disappeared into the darkness. Then Catherine's legs gave out, and she sat hard on the porch steps, the rifle clattering beside her. Dakota knelt in front of her, his hands hovering uncertainly. "Are you hurt?" "No, no." She looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. The fear in his eyes, the protective fury, the carefully controlled violence. "You would have killed them. For me." "Yes." No hesitation. "I don't want anyone to die for me." "Then we'll hope they're smart enough not to come back." He sat beside her on the steps, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "That was either very brave or very stupid, what you did." "Both, probably." Catherine found herself laughing, the slightly hysterical sound. "I didn't think. I couldn't let them hurt you." Dakota turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Why?" "Because I need you. Because this place feels like home. Because when you smile at me, I forget to be afraid." Catherine couldn't say any of that aloud, so she settled for, "Because you gave me a chance when no one else would. Because you see a woman worth saving, not just a problem to solve." Catherine. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "We should go inside." But neither of them moved. The desert dawn was breaking around them, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And Catherine felt the last of her walls crumbling into dust. "They call you a savage," she whispered. Dakota's hand found hers, his touch gentle. "And what do you call me?" "Mine," she breathed, and kissed him. It was a desperate kiss, born of fear and relief and months of careful circling. Dakota froze for one heartbeat. Then his hands cupped her face with a tenderness that made her want to weep. "Catherine, are you sure? You don't have to. This doesn't have to be." "I'm sure." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "But go slow. It hurts, sometimes, the memory." "Then let me love you gently," he murmured, and kissed her again. They didn't make it past the living room. Dakota carried her inside, kicked the door shut, and laid her on the woven rug in front of the cold fireplace with a care that spoke of reverence. His hands shook as he pushed her hair back from her face. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he said. "Any time, any reason." Catherine nodded, then guided his hand to the buttons of her nightgown. "Don't stop. Please don't stop." He undressed her slowly, pressing kisses to each new inch of revealed skin. Her throat, her collarbone, the scar on her shoulder from where Nathaniel had thrown a bottle. When Dakota's lips touched that scar, Catherine flinched. "Does it hurt?" he asked immediately, pulling back. "No, he put it there, with rage." She touched Dakota's face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Touch it again. Replace the memory." So he did, kissing the scar with such gentleness that Catherine felt tears slip down her temples. And he kissed every other mark of violence on her body, the faint bruises that had faded to yellow, the small burns from carelessly handled cigars, the shadows of fear itself. "You're beautiful," he whispered against her skin. "Strong, whole, his." "Yours," she corrected, arching into his touch. I'm yours, Dakota. His control broke then. He claimed her mouth again, deeper this time, his body settling between her thighs. Catherine felt the evidence of his desire and wasn't afraid. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to build something new over the ruins of her past. Together? He asked, poised at the edge of joining. Together, she promised. He entered her slowly, giving her body time to adjust, his eyes never leaving hers. Catherine gasped at the stretch, at the fullness, at the absolute rightness of having him inside her. This was nothing like the brutal taking she'd endured with Nathaniel. This was choice. This was trust. Okay? Dakota's voice was strained, his muscles trembling with the effort of staying still. More than okay. She wrapped her legs around his hips, drawing him deeper. Love me like I matter. You're everything that matters, he said, and began to move. They found a rhythm together, slow and deep, building pleasure like gathering storm clouds. Catherine had never known her body could feel like this. Like sunlight breaking through darkness, like water in the desert, like coming home to a place she'd never been before. When she shattered, Dakota caught her cry with his mouth, swallowing her pleasure as his own followed. They collapsed together, breath mingling, hearts hammering, two broken pieces fitting together into something unexpectedly whole. In the aftermath, Dakota pulled a blanket over them both and gathered Catherine against his chest. She listened to his heartbeat slow, felt his fingers trace lazy patterns on her spine. I broke my promise, he said quietly. What promise? I swore I wouldn't let myself care again. Swore I'd keep myself locked away. He tipped her chin up, so she had to meet his eyes. You picked every lock I had, Catherine Monroe. She smiled, tracing the silver medallion at his throat. What is this? I've seen you wear it every day. My father gave it to me before he died. Said it would protect me, guide me. Dakota's expression softened. I think he sent you to me. Some kind of cosmic balance. I lost my family, but I got you. I'm not a replacement for them. No, you're something new. Something I didn't know I needed until you stumbled into that trading post, looking like hell itself was on your heels. He kissed her forehead. Marry me. Catherine's breath caught. What? Marry me. Not because you need protection or I need a housekeeper. Marry me because I love you. Because I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Because together is better than alone. Tears spilled over Catherine's cheeks, happy ones this time. The white church won't marry us. They'll call it miscegenation, make it illegal. Then we'll do it the Apache way, under the stars, with the earth as our witness. We'll speak our promises to each other and mean them. That's what matters, not what some preacher says. He wiped her tears away with his thumbs. Say yes, Catherine. Say you'll build a life with me. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Dakota, I'll marry you. They held the ceremony 3 weeks later, under a full moon that turned the desert silver. Maria and her husband stood witness as Dakota wove flowers through Catherine's hair and spoke words in Apache that she didn't understand but felt in her soul. Then Catherine spoke her own vows, in English, her voice clear and strong. I was dead before I met you. You gave me life, hope, purpose. I promise to stand beside you always, to defend this land, this life we're building, to love you with everything I am, together. Together, Dakota echoed, and sealed their vows with a kiss that tasted like forever. 6 months later, Catherine stood on the porch of their ranch house, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Dakota work with the horses in the distance. Maria had confirmed what Catherine already knew. There was a baby coming, a child born of love instead of violence. She'd written to her sister in St. Louis, the only family member she'd ever truly cared for. The letter had been simple. I'm alive. I'm happy. I'm free. The response had come yesterday. Thank God. Come visit when you can. Bring your husband. I want to meet the man who taught you to smile again. Dakota looked up from his work, caught her watching, and waved. Catherine waved back, feeling the baby flutter inside her like butterfly wings. She'd come west, running from death, and found life instead. Sometimes salvation came in the form you least expected, with dark eyes, gentle hands, and a willingness to be called a savage by people who didn't understand that real strength lay in choosing gentleness, despite every reason to be cruel. Catherine touched her belly again, smiled, and went inside to start dinner. Their dinner, in their home, together. The peaceful months that followed their wedding felt like a dream Catherine feared she'd wake from. But each morning brought new proof of its reality. Dakota's arm around her waist, the baby growing inside her, the ranch flourishing under their combined efforts. She'd learned to read the desert like a book, to understand the language of horses, to shoot with accuracy that made even the ranch hands grudgingly respectful. But peace in the Arizona Territory was always temporary. The trouble started with the railroad. Catherine first heard about it from Maria, who'd heard it from her husband, who'd heard it in town. The Southern Pacific was planning a new route through the territory, and they were buying up land, or taking it when buying proved inconvenient. They're offering good money, Maria said, as they preserved peaches one sweltering afternoon. Manuel says some ranchers are selling, moving to California or back east. Catherine's hands stilled over the mason jar. Dakota won't sell. This land, it's all he has left of his father's legacy. I know. Maria's expression was troubled. That's what worries me. Men like the railroad agents, they don't take no for an answer. And Dakota, she trailed off meaningfully. Is Apache, you mean? They'll use that against him. Catherine felt anger kindle in her chest, hot and fierce. 6 months ago, she would have been afraid. Now she was furious. They'll claim he has no legal right, even with the deed. Probably. Maria reached over and squeezed her hand. But he has you now, and you're not the scared woman who stumbled into the trading post anymore. You're a force, Catherine. Don't forget that. That evening, Catherine told Dakota what she'd heard. They sat on the porch as the sun set, his hand resting on her belly, where the baby kicked with increasing vigor. I knew it was coming, he said quietly. The railroad men have been surveying the area for weeks. I've seen their markers on the eastern boundary. What will you do? What can I do? I have the deed. The land is legally mine. But his voice lacked conviction, and Catherine understood why. Legal didn't mean much when you were Apache, and the men making decisions were white. Then we fight, she said firmly. Together. We fought off Blackwood. We can fight off railroad agents. Dakota turned to look at her, something fierce and proud in his expression. You're 7 months pregnant. You shouldn't be fighting anyone. I'm pregnant, not helpless. And this baby, she pressed his hand more firmly against her belly, this baby deserves to inherit this land. Our land. So we fight. However we have to. He pulled her close, careful of her swollen belly, and kissed her temple. What did I do to deserve you? You saw me when I was invisible. Now I see you. That's marriage, isn't it? Seeing each other clearly and choosing each other anyway. The railroad agents arrived 2 weeks later, 3 men in expensive suits that looked absurdly out of place against the desert landscape. Catherine watched from the window as Dakota met them at the property line, his posture deceptively relaxed. She'd learned to read his body language, and right now, everything about him screamed controlled danger. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see its progression. The agents talking, gesturing broadly. Dakota shaking his head. One of the agents stepping closer, his finger jabbing toward Dakota's chest. Dakota not moving, but somehow seeming to grow larger, more threatening. Then one of the agents made a mistake. He pushed Dakota's shoulder. Catherine was moving before she consciously decided to, grabbing the rifle by the door and stepping onto the porch. Her pregnancy made her movements slower, but her aim was still true as she fired a warning shot into the air. All 4 men turned to stare at her. "Gentlemen," she called out, her voice carrying across the distance with surprising authority. "I suggest you remove your hand from my husband before I remove it for you." The agent who'd pushed Dakota stepped back quickly, his face reddening. "Ma'am, this is business. This is my home, my land, and you're trespassing." Catherine walked down the porch steps with as much dignity as her belly allowed. "My husband has been polite. I'm less inclined to courtesy. State your business and leave, or leave without stating it. Those are your options." One of the other agents, older, with silver hair and calculating eyes, smiled slightly. "Mrs. Dakota, is it? We're representing the Southern Pacific Railroad. We're prepared to offer a very generous sum for this property. It's not for sale. Everything is for sale, at the right price, ma'am. We're authorized to offer..." "No." Dakota's voice cut through the agent's pitch like a blade. "You heard my wife. The land isn't for sale. Not at any price." The silver-haired agent's smile didn't waver, but something cold entered his eyes. "That's unfortunate. The railroad is coming through this area regardless. It would be easier for everyone if you cooperated." "Is that a threat?" Catherine asked, stepping up beside Dakota. "It's a fact. The railroad has eminent domain. If you won't sell, they'll take it anyway. You'll get far less compensation, and you'll be removed by force if necessary." The agent tipped his hat mockingly. "Think about it. You have 2 weeks before we file the claim. 2 weeks to take the generous offer or lose everything." They left in a cloud of dust, and Catherine watched them go, with her heart hammering against her ribs. "They can't just take it," she said, but even as she spoke, she knew they could. They would. They can, and they will. Dakota's jaw was tight with fury. The government loves eminent domain when it means taking Apache land. They've been doing it for decades. "Then we need help. A lawyer. Someone who knows how to fight this legally." "Catherine." Dakota turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Lawyers cost money we don't have. And even if we could afford one, do you really think any court will side with an Apache against the railroad?" "I think we have to try." Catherine grabbed his hands, squeezing hard. "I didn't survive, Nathaniel. Didn't build a life here with you. Didn't carry our child just to give up because the odds are bad. We fight. That's what we do." Dakota studied her face for a long moment, then slowly smiled. "You know what the Apache word for warrior is? Naichi. But there's no different word for male or female warriors. A warrior is a warrior, regardless of gender." He touched her face tenderly. You're Naichi, Catherine. Through and through. Then let's be warriors together, she said, and kissed him. The solution came from an unexpected source. Maria's cousin, a lawyer named Thomas Whitmore who practiced in Tucson. He was young, idealistic, and, most importantly, outraged by the railroad's tactics. They're doing this all over the territory, Thomas explained when he rode out to survey the ranch 3 days later. You have witnesses who can testify to the property's condition and improvements. And fourth, he smiled slightly, you have something they didn't count on. What's that? Dakota asked. A white woman willing to stand beside her Apache husband in court. It shouldn't matter, but it does. You undermine their narrative that you're some savage squatting on land. You're a married couple, legal property owners, with a baby on the way. That's sympathetic. That's American. Thomas's expression hardened. I can work with that. Catherine felt Dakota tense beside her, and she understood why. It was infuriating that her whiteness gave them an advantage, that the system was so fundamentally broken that her skin color mattered more than his legitimate ownership. I know it's wrong, Thomas said quietly, reading their expressions. The whole system is wrong. But I'm a lawyer, not a revolutionary. I work within the system to change what I can, and right now, I can help you keep your land. Will you let me? Dakota looked at Catherine, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded. All right, Dakota said. We'll do it your way. We'll fight them in court. Good. Then we have work to do. Thomas spread papers across the table. I need you to document everything, every improvement to the property, every expense, every interaction with the railroad agents. We're going to bury them in evidence that you're legitimate landowners who've invested their lives in this place. Over the next week, Catherine and Dakota compiled their case. Receipts for supplies, testimonies from neighbors, photographs of the ranch that Dakota had taken years ago compared to recent ones showing improvements. Maria and her husband provided statements. Even the general store owner, reluctant but honest, confirmed their regular purchases and upstanding character. Catherine worked tirelessly despite her advancing pregnancy, her natural organizational skills proving invaluable. She created a chronology, cross-referenced documents, and prepared arguments that made Thomas shake his head in admiration. You should have been a lawyer, he told her. I should have been a lot of things, Catherine replied, filing another document. But I'm a rancher's wife, and right now, that's exactly what I need to be. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, which meant Catherine would be 9 months pregnant when they went to court. Dakota wanted to postpone, but Thomas advised against it. They're counting on you not showing up, he explained. They'll argue you've abandoned the claim. We need to be there. Show the judge you're serious about keeping the land. So Catherine prepared for 2 battles simultaneously, the legal fight for their land and the impending birth of their child. The contractions started 2 days before the hearing. Catherine was in the kitchen, reviewing documents for the 100th time, when the first pain gripped her abdomen with surprising intensity. She gasped, dropping the papers. Catherine? Dakota was beside her instantly, his face going pale. Is it the baby? She breathed through the contraction, counting the seconds until it passed. But it's too early. The hearing. Forget the hearing. Dakota was already guiding her toward the bedroom. I'm getting Maria. No. Catherine grabbed his arm. Not yet. First babies take a long time. Hours, sometimes days. We have time. Catherine, listen to me. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. That hearing determines our child's future, whether they inherit this land or lose it. We can't miss it. We won't miss it. You're in labor. And I'll likely be in labor for the next 24 hours. Maria said so herself. First babies are slow. Another contraction hit, and Catherine breathed through it. We have time. Trust me, please. Dakota looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew that expression on her face, the one that said she'd made up her mind and nothing would change it. At least let me send for Maria now, he compromised. So she's here when things progress. Catherine nodded, and Dakota ran to saddle the fastest horse. Within an hour, Maria arrived and confirmed Catherine's assessment. The contractions were still far apart. The baby wouldn't come for many hours yet. But you should be resting, Maria scolded, not thinking about courtrooms and railroads. I'll rest after we win. Catherine managed a smile between contractions. Tell me honestly, Maria, can I make it to town and back tomorrow? Maria exchanged a long look with Dakota, then sighed. Probably, if we time it right, if the baby cooperates. But Catherine, it's a risk. Everything worthwhile is a risk. Catherine touched her belly, feeling the baby shift inside her. You hear that, little one? Your mama is stubborn. You get that from both sides of your family. That night, the contractions intensified, but remained irregular. Catherine dozed between them, Dakota holding her hand, neither of them speaking about the possibility that they might be forced to choose between their child's birth and their land's future. But when dawn came, Catherine was still pregnant, still determined, and still convinced they could do both. We're going to that hearing, she announced, pulling herself out of bed with Dakota's help. Maria, help me dress. Something that hides the belly as much as possible. I don't want the judge's sympathy vote just because I'm pregnant. Catherine, that's madness. It's strategy. She let Maria lace her into a dress that was loose enough to accommodate her size, but structured enough to look respectable. They're expecting me to be a liability, the emotional pregnant wife. Instead, I'm going to be the educated, articulate woman who knows every detail of our case. I'm going to surprise them. Dakota watched her prepare with something like awe on his face. You're terrifying. You know that? Good. Catherine pinned her hair up with practiced efficiency. Let's go terrify some railroad agents. The ride to town was excruciating. Every jolt of the wagon sent pain radiating through Catherine's body, and the contractions were coming closer together now. Every 15 minutes, then every 12. But she kept her face composed, breathing through each wave of pain, her hand gripping Dakota's, so hard she thought she might break his fingers. We can still turn back, he said quietly. No, we can't. Catherine met his eyes. This baby needs a home, Dakota. A real home that no one can take away. That's what we're fighting for. That's worth a little pain. A little pain turned out to be a severe understatement. By the time they reached the courthouse, Catherine's contractions were 8 minutes apart and intensifying. Maria supported her on one side, Dakota on the other, and together they climbed the courthouse steps, while curious onlookers whispered and pointed. Thomas met them at the entrance, his eyes widening. Dear God, you're in labor. Observant, Catherine managed through gritted teeth. Can we win this quickly? I'll do my best. Thomas looked at Dakota. If she needs to leave. She won't, Catherine interrupted. Let's go, now. The courtroom was smaller than Catherine had imagined, and filled with hostile faces. Railroad executives, their lawyers, and a handful of townspeople who'd come to watch the spectacle. Judge Morrison was an older man with steel-gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. Catherine sat between Dakota and Thomas, her hands folded over her belly, breathing carefully through each contraction. She'd timed them now, 7 minutes apart. They had maybe an hour, possibly less, before things became critical. The railroad's lawyer spoke first, laying out their case with practiced confidence. Eminent domain, public good, fair compensation. He made it sound reasonable, inevitable, like Dakota was being unreasonable for refusing to surrender his life's work. Then Thomas stood, and Catherine felt a surge of pride at how fiercely he defended their rights. He presented their documents, their testimonies, their photographs. He spoke eloquently about the law, about property rights, about the danger of allowing corporations to seize land at will. But Catherine could see the judge's expression, skeptical, unmoved. They were losing. 6 minutes between contractions now. Catherine's water hadn't broken yet, but she could feel the baby dropping lower, preparing. Not yet, she thought desperately. Just a few more minutes. Please. Your Honor, the railroad's lawyer said smoothly. Opposing counsel makes passionate arguments, but the law is clear. Eminent domain supersedes individual property rights when public interest is at stake. Catherine stood up. Every eye in the courtroom turned to her. Dakota reached for her arm, but she shook him off gently. Another contraction was building, but she pushed through it, her voice clear and strong. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Morrison frowned. You're not a lawyer, Mrs. Love. Mrs. Dakota. And no, I'm not a lawyer, but I am a property owner. I am a citizen. And I am. She pressed a hand to her belly, about to give birth to the next generation, who will either inherit a nation of laws, or a nation where corporations decide who has rights and who doesn't. Mrs. Dakota, please sit down. No. Catherine stepped forward, her voice rising. You want to talk about public good? The public good is served by protecting property rights for everyone, not just the wealthy and powerful. My husband bought this land legally. He improved it. He paid taxes on it. He did everything the law requires. And now you're going to take it because he's Apache? Because some railroad executive decided our home would make a convenient right-of-way? She advanced toward the judge's bench, and she saw something shift in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. I came west running from violence and illegality, Catherine continued. I thought the frontier would be lawless, savage, but the only savagery I've found has been from supposedly civilized men who think laws don't apply when dealing with people they consider lesser. She turned to face the railroad lawyers. You call my husband a savage, but he's shown more respect for law and order than you've shown in this entire proceeding. Another contraction hit, harder this time, and Catherine swayed. Dakota was there instantly, catching her, but she pushed through the pain. Grant them eminent domain here, she said, her voice shaking but determined, and every small landholder in the territory is at risk. Today, it's an Apache rancher. Tomorrow, it's a widow with children, or a homesteader, or anyone else who doesn't have enough money to fight back. Where does it end, Your Honor? When is enough land enough? She doubled over then, the contraction too strong to hide. Maria rushed forward, and Dakota swept Catherine into his arms. I think, Judge Morrison said dryly, we should take a recess. Mrs. Dakota clearly needs medical attention. No, Catherine gasped. Decide now. Please, my baby, our baby, deserves to know if they're inheriting a home or becoming homeless. Decide now. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Morrison studied Catherine's face, then Dakota's. Then the mountain of evidence spread across Thomas's table. The court, he said slowly, finds insufficient grounds for eminent domain in this case. The railroad has not demonstrated that this specific property is essential to their route, nor have they proven that alternative routes are unfeasible. The Dakotas have legal title to the land and have made substantial improvements. Their property rights are hereby affirmed. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. Someone get this woman to a doctor. Catherine heard Dakota's shout of victory, heard Thomas laughing with relief, heard the railroad lawyers' outraged protests. But it all faded into background noise as another contraction gripped her, the strongest yet, and her water broke, soaking the courtroom floor. "Hospital," Maria commanded. "Now!" "No time," Dakota said grimly, already carrying Catherine toward the door. "We won't make it. Maria, we need a room. Any room." The courthouse clerk, an older woman who'd been watching the proceedings with obvious sympathy, stepped forward. "Judge's chambers. It's private. I'll fetch the doctor." What followed was a blur of pain and effort. Catherine had thought she understood hard work, thought she'd built strength over the months on the ranch. But labor was its own kind of battle, primal, exhausting, and absolutely unrelenting. Dakota stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement in both English and Apache. Maria coached her breathing. And when the doctor finally arrived, he seemed almost unnecessary. The baby was coming whether medical assistance was present or not. "Push," Maria commanded, and Catherine pushed. "Breathe," Dakota whispered, and Catherine breathed. "Almost there," the doctor said, and Catherine pushed again. And then, finally, miraculously, there was a baby's cry, thin and outraged and absolutely perfect. "A girl," the doctor announced, placing the bloody, squirming infant on Catherine's chest. "Small but healthy. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a set of lungs that'll wake the dead." Catherine looked down at her daughter, at her dark eyes and shock of black hair, at the tiny fists waving indignantly, and started crying. Dakota knelt beside the makeshift bed, one hand on Catherine's shoulder, the other gently touching their daughter's head. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's fierce," Catherine corrected, smiling through tears. "She fought for her home before she was even born." "What will you call her?" Maria asked, beaming. Catherine looked at Dakota, and they both knew without speaking. "Nechi," Catherine said. "We'll call her Nechi, warrior." They brought Nechi home 3 days later, riding back to the ranch in the same wagon that had carried Catherine to court. The baby slept peacefully through the journey, wrapped in blankets Maria had sewn, completely unaware that she already owned more land than most people would ever see. Thomas had filed the final paperwork, making their victory official. The railroad had appealed, but the judge's decision was sound, and Thomas was confident it would hold. Their home was safe, their land was secure, and their family was complete. That first night home, Catherine sat in the rocking chair Dakota had built while she was pregnant, nursing Nechi and watching the stars emerge over the desert. Dakota sat on the floor beside them, his head resting against her knee, his hand on the baby's small back. "I was thinking," Catherine said quietly, "about what you said once, that you lost your family, but got me instead. I remember. You didn't just get me, you got us." She looked down at Nechi's tiny face, still amazed that this perfect creature had grown inside her. "We're your family now, the 3 of us, and whoever else comes along." "Whoever else?" Dakota looked up sharply. "You want more children after what you just went through?" Catherine laughed softly. "Maybe not immediately, but someday, yes. This ranch is big enough for a whole brood of warriors. Dakota stood, kissing her forehead. Then Naichi's. A whole brood of warriors, he repeated. God help the railroad agents then. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the desert night sounds, coyotes calling, wind through the sage, the subtle creaks of their home settling. Catherine had traveled so far from the terrified woman who'd stumbled into the trading post 9 months ago. She'd found strength she didn't know she possessed, built a life she'd never dared imagine, and created a family from the ashes of her past. "Thank you," she whispered to Dakota. "For what? For seeing me, for giving me a chance, for building this with me." She gestured around the room, at the home they'd made together, the land they'd fought for, the baby sleeping in her arms, for all of it. Dakota took her free hand, kissing her knuckles. "Thank you for picking every lock I had, for making me believe in family again, for being stubborn enough to go into labor in a courtroom just to prove a point." "Our daughter gets that from both of us," Catherine said, smiling. "Stubbornness runs in the family now, among other things." Dakota touched Naichi's hand, and the baby's fingers wrapped around his automatically. "She's going to be formidable. She already is." Catherine looked down at her daughter, feeling a fierce surge of protective love. "She's a warrior, just like her father, just like her mother." Outside, the desert wind sang through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Catherine closed her eyes and breathed it in. The smell of home, of freedom, of a future they'd fought for and won. Together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Catherine, Dakota, and little Naichi's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.